On this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly, let's read official Sega Dreamcast magazine issue number 1 from September of 1999. Alright, so this time on the show we have the official Dreamcast magazine issue number 1 from September of 1999. That, of course, was the month that the Dreamcast launched, very famously on 9/9/99. And for those of you who follow the show on social media, you'll know that I'm currently working on the launch episode for the Dreamcast. I can't really say when that's going to be out. It's going to be a while, but I figured that doing this episode would be kind of a cool little teaser or lead up to the eventual launch episode when that does come out. So not surprisingly, the cover story here is Sonic Adventure. They say they have an exclusive review, the only full US review, except no substitutes. And they mention the 19 launch games. As we'll see, they didn't exactly get the correct 19. I'm sure they were just going off what information they had from Sega. And yeah, that's about it. Inside, everything you need to know about your next system. So opening it up to the first page, kind of an odd place for a letter from the editor, but that's okay. So the editor-in-chief of the magazine was this guy, Simon Cox. I should mention that this magazine was put out by Imagine Publishing, who also did PSM. I'm not going to read the letter from the editor here, but basically what he's talking about is how great the Dreamcast is going to be, and wants to try to reassure readers that even though this is the official Dreamcast magazine, meaning that they have some kind of license from Sega, that they're not going to be biased. And then if we fold it out, we have an ad here for Ready to Rumble Boxing, which, I mean, we could talk about the game later, or we could just talk about it now. This was definitely a popular title on the Dreamcast. Also came out for the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation, but at least for me, I most closely associate the game with the Dreamcast. Not really that fun of a game to play single player, in my opinion. It's more of a party game to play two-player. But, you know, obviously it's a very cartoony boxing game. The game was, of course, named after the famous saying that Michael Buffer always uses still to this day when he does the intros for boxing matches. You know, and he has that saying copyrighted so that if anybody says it on TV or even on a YouTube channel, they might get a copyright strike. So I'm not going to say it. And Michael Buffer does do a lot of voiceover work for this game. He introduces all of the boxers and whatnot. So that's pretty cool because, you know, he was, of course, quite popular back then. I feel like boxing is not really as popular anymore as it once was.
Angel Raging Rivera. Let's rumble, Holmes.
But, you know, it's got all of these, like, boxers with stereotypical names based on where they're from. So, in some ways, the game is a little bit of a spiritual successor to Punch-Out, although maybe a little bit more adult-oriented. And, like I said, it's a cool game. It's just not really that cool of a game to play single-player, in my opinion. Here we have the table of contents, which, as always, we don't read. Here we get into the letters section, and, you know, I already perused the letters section. I'm just going to be honest and say there's really nothing here that's worthy of discussion. So we're going to kind of skip over this as well, but I'll just mention the three people over here that are sort of the backbone of the magazine at this point. Simon Cox, as I mentioned, Randy Nelson, and the only one of these three names that I actually recognize is Francesca Reyes, and I don't actually know what happened to her. If you Google her, I can't really find anything, but I remember she wrote for PSM for a while. She became the editor-in-chief of the official Xbox magazine, if I remember correctly. But like after that, it seems like she kind of disappeared, or my Google skills just aren't very good. Here they talk about, I guess, I don't know if this page is supposed to be like a placeholder, because it's, you know, the disc guide. And so normally, these issues came with a demo disc. But this first issue didn't come with a demo disc because the Dreamcast console itself came with a demo disc. So you didn't really need one in the magazine. So I guess maybe in future issues, this is where they were going to talk about what was on the demo disc that came with the magazine. And so instead, they just give you some previews of what's going to be in issue number 2 and what's going to be in issue number 3. Here's an ad for Blue Stinger. I'm just going to be honest and say I haven't played Blue Stinger. I should mention there's going to be a number of games in this issue that I have not played. And, you know, unlike with cartridge-based systems where I just have an EverDrive and I can play whatever I want, with the Dreamcast, if I don't have a game, I can't really play it. So the best I can do really is watch a YouTube video, but I know that's not the same. But so I haven't played Blue Stinger personally. I know it's well regarded, at least among certain people, but I really don't have an opinion. Here we get into the DC Direct section, which is just sort of Dreamcast news. They do talk about the lineup here. They say the lineup in full, and then I guess sort of as I alluded to, they say, you know, at the time of writing, the following games were confirmed for September 9th. If some don't appear, don't call us. And that's because, you know, there are a few games in here that were not launch titles, but there were 19 games that came out. It just, some other games ended up sneaking into the launch lineup. So like they have Marvel vs. Capcom here and King of Fighters Dream Match 99. And both of those were not, didn't end up being launch titles. And then they have this game Armada, which I've never even heard of, to be honest, and it definitely was not a launch title. They do mention down here, here's what's on the disc that comes with the system. Well, they mention here also, here's what comes in the box. It's pretty much what you would expect to come in a console box. Although, you know, the one thing that I guess sort of stands out as being new is that it comes with the with that disc so that you can get on the internet, the Dreamcast Passport web software. But I mean, other than that, it's like, you know, it's a console and a controller and, you know, power cord and AV cable. And then down here, they do mention what's on the demo disc. So this is what the demo disc looked like that came with the system. You know, very similar to the discs that would come with the PlayStation. And as they say, well, what do they say down here? On the disc, playable demos of Sonic Adventure, Ready to Rumble, Monaco Grand Prix, Power Stone, House of the Dead 2, Flag to Flag, and Sega Bass Fishing. So, yeah, that's what's on the disc. It came with some movies, too. I don't know about you guys. I was really never into watching the movies on demo disc. Like, if it wasn't something I could play, I didn't really want to hear about it. DC Direct continuing over here. Here's, they talk about peripherals that are up for grabs. But you notice they're all third-party peripherals. They don't even mention in here, maybe it comes later, I don't know. They don't mention, like, the VMU or the Jump Pack. And but they have like the Tremor Pack, which was Interact third-party jump pack, which just gave a vibration function to to any controller. And nothing really stands out here too much. I guess the two things I'll mention up here, they've got the Age Tech arcade stick. This was pretty much the gold standard as far as arcade sticks go on the Dreamcast. Really good joystick. I actually have one of these. And I don't remember how much it cost when it came out, though, and they don't tell you here. And there were multiple light guns that came out for the Dreamcast. The one they're showing here is Interact Starfire Light Blaster. The one I have is actually a Mad Catz. I think they're going to mention it somewhere later in the issue, but while there is an official Sega light gun, they didn't release it in the West. So you had to buy a third-party controller as far as light guns go. Over here, they mention that an Alone in the Dark game is going to be coming out for the Dreamcast. NBA Showtime is coming from Midway. MDK2. I never really saw what all the hubbub was about with the MDK games. Admittedly, I haven't spent that much time with them, but they mention a Sega F355 Challenge that it was coming out in the arcades. And as you may or may not know, there was the Sega Naomi arcade system, which was pretty much just the arcade version of the Dreamcast. So there were tons of Naomi games that ended up coming out on the Dreamcast, and this was one of them. And this was a Yu Suzuki design game. Supposedly he made this game because he himself drove a Ferrari F355 as like his daily driver, I guess. I think I've only played this game once or twice on the Dreamcast, but apparently the physics are very realistic, so it's not so much arcadey as you might expect. And then over here they talk about the zip drive that was going to be coming out for the Dreamcast. Now, you know, obviously that never came out, but it did get into the prototype stage. And I know I've seen a picture somewhere they made it so that it would sit right underneath your Dreamcast, and that was supposed to give you more room for game save data. And at least according to this, it was also going to let you save emails and media clips that you downloaded off the internet. And then, you know, thank God this didn't happen. This device will eventually be called into play for downloading game updates. So, you know, obviously now that's the bane of a lot of gamers' existence, is that games constantly need to be updated. And apparently we dodged a bullet on the Dreamcast. Over here they mentioned Sonic's going to be coming back to afternoon TV. Now, when this came out, I was like 22 years old, so that's not the kind of thing that I was personally going to be interested in. Although here's something I was somewhat interested in. They've got this little blurb here about the Neo Geo Pocket Color. And I remember that I was very tempted to buy a Neo Geo Pocket Color, and I ended up not doing it just because I really didn't want to buy a screen that wasn't lit. And it's one of the things I kind of regret, actually. I remember looking at these at KB Toys, and I ended up just not getting it. As they say here, the system only cost $69. And, you know, expectedly games were about 30 bucks. And, I mean, for anybody out there that might not know, the reason this was being featured in Dreamcast magazine is that there was a link cable that would allow you to hook your Neo Geo Pocket Color up to your Dreamcast through the serial port on the back. And there were certain games where you could trade data back and forth. Over here, there's this sort of this creepy ad. You'll see there's a few of these in here. Sega, went around the time of the Dreamcast launch, Sega had some kind of creepy ads that they put out that kind of didn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, obviously you were reading a Dreamcast magazine, so the fact that this ad is in here is really not a big deal. But, you know, if you saw this ad in some other magazine, you maybe wouldn't really know what the heck was going on. Here's an ad for TNN Motorsports Hardcore Heat. This is, I don't know, it's kind of an okay game. It's like a dirt track racing game. And I mean, I don't know who among you out there remembers the TNN network. Didn't that change into OLN, Outdoor Life Network? And I think now it's just NBC Sports Network. But yeah, I remember when it was TNN. I used to get it confused with TNT. But anyway, it's an okay game. There were other racers available at launch, and so I don't really know why anybody would want to pick this one up. But maybe if you were very specifically a fan of this style of racing, then it might be worth picking up. I don't really know. Here's an ad for Power Stone. Power Stone, so this was a launch game. Cool game. Definitely well regarded by most. I don't really know what you would really call this style of game. I guess maybe like an arena fighter. You just had like this arena, for lack of a better word, that you know, you could move around. It was, you know, it was a three-dimensional little world, and there were like items you could pick up and use as weapons. There were power-ups that would just pop up around the level that you would try to grab before your opponent did. Really cool game. I don't want to call it unique just because I feel like maybe there are other games like this and I'm just not knowing. But it was a cool game, and there was a sequel, Power Stone 2, that also came out on the Dreamcast. Here we've got some previews. They call it Fantasy Zone, so I guess this is going to be, well, it says here, Dreamcast RPG Scene. So I guess they're planning on having this as sort of a special section for role-playing game news. And they talk here about Sega introducing Project Ares to the world. And they're saying that it's by the people that made Phantasy Star, and featuring a completely original cast of characters in a fantastic world in which flying ships are the main means of transportation. Project Ares capitalizes on the power of the Dreamcast by taking place in a 3D universe. And they show us some screenshots here, and you see the airship there and the airship there. And if you haven't figured it out already, this game eventually was released as Skies of Arcadia. Over here, now we're in the arcade zone with Sega Coin-Op news. And here they're talking about Crazy Taxi, which was another Naomi game, and you see here they talk about the Naomi a little bit. Crazy Taxi, of course, ended up coming out on the Dreamcast, and you know, is one of the most iconic games on the system. That you know, anybody that makes a top 5 or a top 10 list of their favorite Dreamcast games, almost inevitably Crazy Taxi ends up on it. There was, of course, Crazy Taxi 2 that was also released on the Dreamcast.
Oh, baby! Move it, baby!
Right on.
Oh, that hurt! Pay more attention! Go that way, baby.
Shut up and move your butt.
Hey, baby.
Over here, we got the start of an ad showing a Dreamcast. This is the heart, and this is the soul. Of course, we have an ad here for SoulCalibur, which, depending on the style of game that you're into, I guess, I would personally say that SoulCalibur was probably the best game that came out at launch. I didn't mention it, but several pages back they had a little blurb talking about what they thought were the 3 standout games of the launch. And that was Sonic Adventure, SoulCalibur, and NFL 2K.
This victory strengthens the soul of Mitsurugi. You win!
Here's an interview with Yuji Naka, who is, of course, the creator of Sonic. I don't really know what there is in here to talk about on a video like this. You know, he just talks about the history of Sonic, how he got into the industry in the first place, and talks a little bit about Sonic Adventure. But that's pretty cool, just because there's not really all that many interviews with Yuji Naka out there, you know, whether online or in magazines. Here we have a pretty cool article with some caveats that I'll point out. They call it D-Day, your survival guide to the DC launch lineup. And they basically, you know, again, there are 19 games coming out for the system, and they're just trying to help you pick which games you want to pick up. The only thing I would say about this article that I just find a little bit strange, so I think it's a good idea that they tried to write this article from the perspective of like a real hardcore gamer and someone that's maybe not a gamer. But for whatever reason, they decided to make up these 2 fake characters. You have Rob here, who's the video game veteran, and then they had to make up this whole profile for the 2 characters. Like, you know, Rob's in his early 20s, but acts like a teenager, plays games all the time, etc., etc. But then they have over here the newbie, who's named Katie, and then it says age, late teens, but hangs out with slightly older guys. Like, what? What? I don't know. That's a little bit cringy. Like, why did you have to put that in there? I don't know. But, and, you know, the rest of the profile of both of them is kind of stupid. But, and then, you know, for each game, there's like fake quotes from these fake people about what they thought of each game. But other than that, I mean, it's a helpful article. If you were somebody that was coming into this and just really wasn't sure what games you wanted to pick up. Like, I had a magazine very similar to this when the PlayStation 2 came out, because I got that system at launch. And, you know, PSM put out this whole launch guide, and I was using that to try to figure out what games I wanted to pick up. So, first here they've got Sonic Adventure, which I guess this is our first chance to talk about Sonic Adventure, although they did do a whole write-up in here. Like I said, it was the only place to get a full review of the game. You know, this might turn some people off, but I'll admit, I've really never been a huge fan of the Sonic Adventure games. Like, for me, Sonic is just a 2D game. Like, I was eventually able to make my peace with the Mario games transitioning into 3D, but for me, the Sonic games being in 3D just feels a little bit weird. That being said, Sonic Adventure is not a bad game at all. It's a game that I need to spend more time with, but I've played it a decent amount, and like I said, it's an okay game. It's just, you know, I'd prefer to go play one of the 2D games personally. Down here, you've got Marvel vs. Capcom, well, from Capcom. And again, this was not a launch title, but it did come out on the Dreamcast along with its sequel, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And, you know, all these Capcom 2D fighters, in my opinion, are good games, and this one's no exception. And they say down here, Capcom held off converting the game for the home until a system powerful enough to handle all those huge sprites and effects in all their glory came around. Dreamcast was that machine. I think Marvel vs. Capcom was a CPS2 game in the arcades. I can't remember for sure, but again, very cool game. Up here we've got SoulCalibur, which we already kind of discussed here. And, you know, they, as you might expect, they recommended it. Over here is House of the Dead 2. Of course, the original House of the Dead came out on the Sega Saturn. And with a light gun, it's a very cool game. You can play House of the Dead 2 with a controller, but, I mean, really, why would you? And certainly at launch, if there had been a light gun controller to pick up, if there was a third-party controller available at whatever store you had gotten your system at, buying House of the Dead 2 would definitely not be a bad decision if you wanted something a little bit different. Up here is this Armada game, which again, I've just never heard of the game. It makes it sound like it's some sort of, well, it says it's like Asteroids meets Star Control, so I don't really know what that even means. But they don't really have much to say about it, and you can see by their faces. So it's kind of like GamePro-esque, where depending on which picture they use, it's supposed to tell you whether or not this was a game they thought was cool or not. And for both of them, they were just kind of like, eh. So not a cool game, I imagine. King of Fighters Dream Match 99, again, was not ended up not being a launch game. The veteran gamer, of course, likes it, and the newbie is not really that big into it. I've personally never played this version of King of Fighters. I've played multiple versions of it on the Neo Geo, but I don't think I ever had King of Fighters 99 for the Neo Geo. I think I had like 96 or 97. Down here is Trick Style, and this admittedly is a game that I had never heard of until I started working on the launch episode. And I don't know how I missed it, because I think this is actually a really cool game. Probably the best way to put it, I would say, like, imagine if you took a game like SSX for the PlayStation 2 and combined that with like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So Trick Style is a racing game, but you can do lots of tricks. Or like a Cool Borders game, I guess. Maybe that's a better example, since Cool Borders came out earlier. But instead of being on snowboards, you're on like these futuristic hoverboards, and the game looks really good, but it's also a whole lot of fun. Over here, we got Blue Stinger. Again, I have not played Blue Stinger, so I really don't have an opinion. Here's Tokyo Extreme Racer. That's a very well-regarded racing game on the Dreamcast. I think it's sort of okay. You can see they both got the little blue pictures, meaning that they didn't think it was all that great either. But I know a lot of people do really like Tokyo Extreme Racer, and I don't dislike it. I just think it's like, it's okay. Down here is TNN Hardcore Heat. Again, we talked about it already. Kind of not that great of a game. For some reason, the newbie likes it, so I don't know why. It says here this one was called Buggy Heat when it was released in Japan. Well, that makes sense, since I don't think they had TNN there. Here's Monaco Grand Prix. The game's not really great trying to play it with the controller. So this game does not have a FIA license, so it doesn't have all the real Formula 1 teams and driver names in it. But then what it has that's really cool is it has a classic mode where you can play in an old-style Grand Prix car, but you can't go race on all the tracks, I don't think, with that. It even says here you can drive around a Seoul countryside course, but it's still pretty cool. Over here is Power Stone, which, they recommend, I guess, for everybody there. We already talked about Power Stone, obviously very cool game. Down here is Hydro Thunder, which we hadn't gotten to yet. If I was buying a Dreamcast at launch, this is a game I would have been very, very tempted by. In fact, if I could go back in time now, I'd pick up SoulCalibur, obviously, and probably NFL 2K, and I'd probably pick up Hydro Thunder as a third game. Very famous and beloved Midway arcade game that, obviously was ported to the Dreamcast, and it's just a really cool game. If for some reason you're watching this and you have not played Hydro Thunder, please do yourself a favor and check that one out. Up here you've got NFL 2K. Again, you could make a case for that being the best game available at launch. That is what got the 2K Sports Series started, which of course unfortunately ended with I think 2K5 when EA bought the exclusivity rights to the NFL from the NFL. But there were 3 NFL 2K games that came out on the Dreamcast, 2K, 2K1, and 2K2. And just awesome games, all of them.
Young throws it left. Phillips catches the ball. He's had enough for the first.
Down here we got Mortal Kombat Gold. Mortal Kombat Gold is sort of a expanded home version of Mortal Kombat 4. I've already gone on the record saying I'm just not the world's hugest Mortal Kombat fan, which, unfortunately angers a lot of people. Having played this game, I would think that if you are somebody who is a Mortal Kombat fan, I think that this is a game that you would like. Over here, you've got NFL Blitz 2000. I mean, if you like the NFL Blitz games, then there's no reason why you shouldn't like this one. I forgot his name, Rob, says, Blitz is a lot of fun in multiplayer, but being a huge football nut, I'd rather have more realism in the long run, like an NFL 2K. That seems like kind of a weird thing to say. I just feel like these two games kind of fill a different need. If you want something more arcadey, then the Blitz games are awesome. Very popular, I think, were all the Blitz games, and this one should be no exception. Up here is Air Force Delta, which is something sort of similar to Ace Combat, I suppose, on the PlayStation. You know, it's an air combat style game. And one of the games that I mentioned earlier that was a launch game that they didn't cover in here was Arrow Wings, which it's funny, if you look at the cover art to Arrow Wings, you would think that that was also an air combat game, but really Arrow Wings was a lot more like Pilot Wings. He likes it, she doesn't. I don't know, whatever. Over here is Ready to Rumble Boxing, which we already talked about. And then they each give their picks for what they would pick up if if they were buying a Dreamcast on launch day. Predictably, the hardcore gamer would get SoulCalibur, Sonic Adventure, NFL 2K, Power Stone, and Marvel vs. Capcom, which once again didn't end up coming out on launch day. This newbie girl would get Sonic Adventure, Ready to Rumble, NFL 2K, House of the Dead 2, and Hydro Thunder. Well, I don't know if you say so. And then down here, I feel like the writers were trying a little bit too hard to be like edgy when they were putting this magazine together. And so down here they have like 5 ways to beat the crush. So it's saying if you forgot to pre-order a Dreamcast, what's your best chance of buying one? Number 1 is call in a bomb scare. And they put a little asterisk and say down here, oh, don't actually call in a bomb scare. But really, why would you say that? And then number 2, swap clothes with a street bum and then stand in line. It will shrink rapidly. Like, I get that you're trying to be edgy, but that's kind of not a cool thing to say. Now we get into the preview section. Oh, here's another one of these advertisements for the Dreamcast that if you didn't know any better, you wouldn't know what they were trying to sell you. It only has very small in the corner over here. You probably can't even see it. It just has the Dreamcast logo and it has Sega.com. First game in the preview section here is Virtua Fighter 3 TB. Obviously, the first 2 Virtua Fighter games ended up coming out on the Saturn. Virtua Fighter was the original pack-in game for the Saturn, and those games are much beloved. I feel like I've read some things about this game that make me think that maybe it is not held in as high regard as the first 2 games, but again, not a game that I've personally played. Next, we've got Sega Rally 2. Obviously, it's the sequel to Sega Rally, which once again came out on the Saturn. Very cool game if you like the Sega Rally games. There's no reason why you shouldn't like this one. My only criticism, if you want to even call it that, is that if you're playing with a controller, in my opinion, it's a little bit difficult with the little tiny thumbstick that it has. Although you can also just play it with the D-pad, that makes it a little bit easier. But it really is an awesome game. And again, this is a game that makes people's list. If they're making a list of the top games on the Dreamcast, you'll often see this on there. Here we have NBA 2000, which ended up coming out as NBA 2K. So I don't know why it's being called NBA 2000 here. All of the 2K sports games were good. Like, everything I said about NFL 2K being a great game is just as true about NBA 2K or NHL 2K. Or what were the baseball games called on the Dreamcast? Was that was World Series baseball, was it? 2K? I don't know. Next, Resident Evil Code Veronica. This game was originally released on the Dreamcast and then later on was re-released on the PlayStation 2 as Code Veronica X. Once again, a highly regarded game, considered by many to be one of the better Resident Evil games. Over here is an ad for Arrow Wings. So this is kind of what I was talking about when I said, like, here's the cover art, but I mean, this is just a bigger version of the cover art. And something about it, I guess, when I look at it, still makes me think that it would be an air combat game because these are sort of fighter-style jets. But I guess if you look more closely, they look a lot more like the Blue Angels or something like that. And that's what the game really is. It's more of like a Pilot Wing style game where you're just doing like stunt flying and whatnot. But it's a cool game. Over here is Castlevania Resurrection, which, if I am not mistaken, did not end up coming out. Here's an ad for Tokyo Extreme Racer, which we already talked about. Here's an ad for Hydro Thunder. Quite colorful ad at that. And yeah, we already talked about this. So just once again, if you haven't played Hydro Thunder, I'm pretty sure it's cheap, so you should pick it up. Apparently, Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie, was coming out on VHS tape. Wow, look at that. And you could get it at Sam Goody. Who remembers Sam Goody? Like, look, this is depressing to look at. They've got Suncoast, which is gone. Virgin Megastores, which I don't know if that still exists anymore or not. Tower Records, gone. Sam Goody, gone. I don't know, the Record Town and Saturday Matinee I've never heard of, but, you know, the bygone era right there. Here you can just subscribe to the magazine if you want, which really wasn't a bad deal. It was $14.95 for 6 issues, because this was a bi-monthly magazine. But remember, you got a demo disc with that too. So at least in my opinion, you know, $2.50 an issue, including a demo disc, is a great deal. Over here we've got Shenmue, which you know, once again, one of the marquee games for the system. Street Fighter Alpha 3, which at least in my opinion was a great entry in the Street Fighter series. I like it quite a bit. And then down here is Toy Commander. Toy Commander is not a game that I've played, as much as I hate it when people on YouTube or on podcasts say this. I did watch a YouTube video of Toy Commander, and at least for me, it looks pretty cool. So, like the stage I watched, somebody was flying a toy plane around a kitchen. So in some ways, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Micro Machines, except this has sort of a combat element to it. Sega Bass Fishing. People love Sega Bass Fishing. Down here is Soul Fighter. Soul Fighter is a game that I used to always think was a fighting game, just because it sounds like it's a fighting game. But it's actually like a 3D beat-em-up game. And it doesn't get very good reviews, but I mean, I gotta say that at least to me, it looked like a game that I would at least like to check out. Over here, here's an interesting ad for GameStop. So this was when GameStop was like brand new, and they're trying to get you to go to their website, thegamestop.com. So, you know, Babbage's started GameStop as a website, and I think they had like 30 stores initially. Not really sure what's different about GameStop versus a Babbage's. I don't really know what made Babbage's decide they wanted to launch this new brand, but you know, now in 2018, GameStop's the only one that's left, and even it's on its way out. Here's Echo the Dolphin, Defender of the Future, which is just a 3D version of Echo the Dolphin. It is a well-regarded game. If you like the Echo the Dolphin games, it's kind of more of the same, just in 3D. Once again, it's a game that I don't have, so I can't show you any footage of it, so you'll just have to look at the screenshots, I guess. Metropolis Street Racer, kind of cool game. I mean, just because it's you know, it's a street racing game, as it suggests. Kind of odd that it is being previewed here in the September of 1999 issue. And I mean, it's got all these screenshots. They must have been pretty deep into the development process, because this game didn't actually come out until 2001. And by then, I guess the Dreamcast was already on its downward slide, which is a shame, but definitely a cool game. Here's Vigilante 8, Second Offense, which, you know, the Vigilante games were basically just a ripoff of the Twisted Metal games. Doesn't mean that they're not good. I mean, Vigilante 8 Second Offense was a good game, but it was really just Twisted Metal, except that it takes place in the 70s instead of the modern day. Here's another one of these creepy ads. Once again, it just has the little Sega thing in the corner, but other than that, it's just this creepy eyeball, so I don't really understand what they were trying to go for there. Here's Climax Landers, which this game came out as Time Stalkers. I haven't played Time Stalkers, but it's a game that I used to always see for sale. Like, you know, you'd see it in like bargain bins, or, you know, when GameStop was still selling Dreamcast games, you'd always see Time Stalkers there. And I would always look at it and think, like, just based on the cover art, this seems like it should be a good game. And, you know, generally speaking, it was always hard to find role-playing games back then because they were more in demand. And so you wouldn't really find used copies of, like, well, Shenmue's not a role-playing game really, but Skies of Arcadia or whatever, like in just the bin full of Dreamcast games. But you used to always see Time Stalkers, and it made me wonder about it. But apparently, again, I haven't played Time Stalkers, but apparently not a very good game. Over here is Dynamite Cop. So Dynamite Cop is the sequel to Dynamite Deca, which was released here in the US as Die Hard Arcade and was one of the more popular games on the Saturn. So if you like Die Hard Arcade, and you should because it's a good game, Dynamite Cop is just more of the same, which should be cool. Down here you've got Floygen Brothers, which for some reason, so Floygen Brothers was made by the same people, Visual Concepts, who made the 2K sports games. And for some reason they decided they were going to make sort of this cartoony, you know, comical adventure game. But it's a cool game. This is another game that ended up not coming out until 2001. But you know, and here they are previewing it in 1999. Over here is just an ad for Mad Catz. All right, here we've got a more in-depth article about Midway, and it certainly bears mentioning, which is why they mentioned it, that Midway had a pretty huge presence on the Dreamcast early in its life. We often talk about the publishers that did not have a presence on the Dreamcast, like Square or EA, but other companies like Midway really stepped in there to fill the void. And so, you know, at launch, you had 4 Midway games that came out for the system in Ready to Rumble, NFL Blitz 2000, Mortal Kombat Gold, and Hydro Thunder. And what this article really does is just go through and give you some more in-depth information about each one of those games. We've already talked about those games, so I'm not really going to go through this article in any kind of depth. But yeah, it's just these aren't reviews. They're really just, I guess, really previews that are just bundled together because they're all from Midway. And, you know, I'm sure not coincidentally, right after that, we have this ad for Mortal Kombat Gold, which, again, at least in my estimation, if you're a Mortal Kombat fan, you will probably like this game. Here's an article called Dreamcast 101, where they're just trying to tell you more about the system itself and what it comes with. And so here they're just talking about the system specs. Like, here's the motherboard. They're showing you what the different chips are on the motherboard. They're talking about the fact that it has a GD-ROM instead of a CD-ROM. So that was a gigabyte disk ROM. So Yamaha and Sega got together and developed this GD-ROM technology that allowed a normal CD to hold over a gigabyte of data. And that had the, in their hope, had the added benefit of being harder to pirate. But as anybody who owned the Dreamcast back in the day knows, people pretty much immediately learned how to pirate Dreamcast games, and that may have had something to do with the Dreamcast downfall. I didn't really know anybody that had a Dreamcast that wasn't playing pirated games. It, of course, has 4 gamepad ports on the front instead of the usual 2, which is nice. They're showing on the back, it's got the modem, the AV out, and then the expansion port or serial port, which is where you would plug in the Neo Geo Pocket Color link cable. Over here, they do finally mention the visual memory unit and what you can do with it. And over here, they talk about the controller. And one odd thing about their little blurb here about the controller is that they don't mention that it has trigger buttons, which, I mean, it certainly can't be the case that the people that worked at this magazine didn't yet have their hands on an actual Dreamcast, because of course they were out in Japan by then. So I don't know why they didn't talk about that. They just talked about the 4 face buttons. They got, of course, the 2 ports on the controller. So, you know, the memory cards plug directly into the controller, similar to a Nintendo 64, rather than plugging into the system like the PlayStation. And then, of course, you could also put a jump pack into one of those. So normally you'd put like a memory card in the top slot so that the screen on the VMU would be visible through this hole. and then you could put a jump pack in the lower slot there. Down here, I talk a little bit more about the VMU. There's the jump pack. So the jump pack was $19.99. So if you bought the third-party Interact one that they mentioned earlier, you were getting it for half price. So that's pretty good. Here they talk about some of the peripherals. We already talked about the Agetec stick there. They also have the light gun, and then you know, here's a rally wheel from Agetec. So I don't know how this one might be. Just in general, I hold Agetec in high regard. So I don't know if that's like the wheel to get or what. I've never owned a Dreamcast wheel myself. Here they're just showing some prototypes of the Dreamcast and what they looked like. Here's the fishing controller, which of course used for Sega bass fishing and Sega marine fishing. There was the keyboard, which I believe the keyboard was available at launch. And that would of course be handy if you were going to use your Dreamcast to go online. And then I don't know when it came out, but if you've ever played Typing of the Dead, that was a cool way to learn how to type if you didn't already know. Typing of the Dead works like House of the Dead, except that you kill enemies by typing in words real fast rather than shooting them with a gun. And then over here they talk about the VGA adapter. I still can't get a straight answer on whether or not the official first-party VGA adapter ever came out in the US or not. There's, of course, many third-party VGA adapters you can just buy, and I don't think there's really any advantage to buying the first-party adapter. Next here, the test zone. So this is supposed to be the reviews section, except as you're going to see, it's pretty light on reviews because, again, this magazine is out before the console was even on shelves. And here you can see they have a Dream Game Award, which they will give to any game that gets a 9 out of 10 or more. And then they have a garbage can that's on fire, so like a dumpster fire game, that they're going to give to the worst game reviewed in that issue. So, of course, the game that they review is Sonic Adventure, which I already kind of gave my thoughts on Sonic Adventure. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad game. It's just not a game that I was really personally able to get into because, you know, I had a Genesis and I played Sonic on there. And I personally was not really able to transition into a three-dimensional Sonic player. It, of course, gets the Dream Game Award from the magazine, as you'd expect. And it's a pretty long review. I think it's like 6 pages. Who's who. They talk about all the characters that are in the game. That's kind of neat, I suppose. You know, of course, Tails is in the game. And, yeah. And you see they give the game a 9 out of 10. Their complaints are that the camera system still isn't perfect. Of course, you know, getting a camera to properly work in any 3D game was a problem for a very long time, so you can't really knock them too much for that. Secondary adventure, a bit shallow, and have you heard the big cat talk? Yeah, there's some bad voice acting in the game a little bit. And is that the only review? I don't remember. No, there's another one. There's more. Here's Monaco Grand Prix. And so yeah, we already talked about this one a little bit. This game also came out on the N64 and the PlayStation. And then oddly, for some reason, they decided they're going to show the N64 box art down in the corner in a Dreamcast magazine. Kind of strange. Again, the game is not licensed by the FIA. It is licensed by the Automobile Club of Monaco because somehow you're not allowed to use the name Monaco in a driving game unless you pay these people. So like if you've ever played one of the Gran Turismo games, those games do have the Monaco circuit in the games, but they call them something else. I forgot what. Because they don't want to pay these people. Here they review House of the Dead 2. Again, I already talked about this game. They give it an 8 out of 10. What are their complaints are B-movie voice overkill, the end boss is cheap, and it's tough if you're new to gun games. I don't know. I don't think the game's that hard if you're new to gun games. But yeah, good game. Here's an ad for Trick Style, which again we already talked about. Although here we got some more screenshots. Again, if you haven't played Trick Style, because this is a game that I don't really ever hear anybody talk about, if you haven't played it, I really suggest checking it out. It really is a cool game. Over here, wow, here's an ad for IGN.com. That's pretty cool. So it was funny. I don't remember what magazine read through I was doing, but I said something about like whatever happened to IGN.com. Like, are they still around? And I got quite a few comments making fun of me. You guys have to understand, I don't play modern games. I don't keep up with modern gaming news. Like, I didn't know that IGN was still a website. And that's what I was saying. Like, I don't know. Are they still around? Because, like, I used to love the IGN websites back around this time. Like, I would go to, like, psx.ign.com, dc.ign.com, which was their Dreamcast site, and then ps2.ign.com. So I used to go to all those sites, but at some point I just stopped paying attention to gaming in the modern sense. And so, like, you know, I just was not aware that IGN is still the premier website for video game news, which good for them. Here they just talk a little bit about getting online with your Dreamcast, which is cool, but not something that I ever did. I mean, I had, you know, a computer with internet, so I personally never had any reason. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever been online with a Dreamcast, even though, like, when I got my Dreamcast in 2001, like early 2001, and like we were still using dial-up at the time, but for whatever reason, I just never plugged my Dreamcast into the phone line and tried to get online, just as I didn't really see a need, I guess. Here, this is pretty cool. They ran a contest where you can win a Hydro Thunder arcade cabinet. That would be really cool, except that's a huge arcade cabinet. But I don't think whoever won that was not complaining about its size. I don't know, what did you have to do here? Set about making an original scale model of a Hydro Thunder boat, then paint it and make it look like the real thing, and put it into a box and send it to us. That's a pretty cool, like most places are just like, oh, fill out the reader response card. But these guys actually made you work a little bit. That's pretty cool. I'd be curious to know, I do have the full run of these magazines. I'd be kind of curious to go through some of the subsequent issues and see if they actually showed the boat of whoever won. But that's pretty cool. And then over here, they're just showing you what's coming up next month. And of course, then they're going to finally have a GD-ROM that was going to come with Virtua Fighter 3 TB, Ready to Rumble, Trick Style, and Dynamite Cop. And they've been reviewing some more games, you know, etc., etc. And over here, they've got an ad for GameDealer.com. I have never heard of that. And then on the back here, you've just got an ad for NFL Quarterback Club 2000. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm being mean or anything. But I'm honestly curious who was going to buy NFL Quarterback Club 2000 for the Dreamcast when you could get NFL 2K instead. So anyway, that is official Dreamcast magazine, issue number 1 from September of 1999. One thing I did not mention is that there actually is an issue 0. I don't have it, of Dreamcast magazine that came out sometime during the summer in 99. And I don't really know what its deal was. I don't know if that was something you can still buy on the newsstands or if that was something that was given away for free. I really have no idea. But anyway, let's take a quick break to hear from this episode's sponsor, and then we will come back with a few final thoughts.
From showering to brushing your teeth to, yes, shaving, everyone has their regular morning grooming routine, and Dollar Shave Club has everything you need to look, feel, and smell your best. They carry a full line of personal care products, including soaps, body washes, hand cream, toothbrushes and toothpaste, personal wipes, and of course their signature line of shaving supplies. And Dollar Shave Club automatically keeps you stocked up so you don't run out, and you choose the delivery frequency so that you only get what you need when you need it. Right now, you can get started with one of their 3 starter sets for just $5 when you visit dollarshaveclub.com/CGQ. The Shave Starter Set comes with the Executive Razor and a 3-ounce tube of their Dr. Carver Shave Butter. The Oral Care Starter Set comes with their weighty toothbrush and a trial-size tube of their Superba toothpaste. And the Shower Starter Set comes with 3 trial-size tubes of their Lavender Body Cleanser, Citrus and Hawaiian Ginger Face Cleanser, and Sage and Black Pepper Shampoo. Get this exclusive deal at dollarshaveclub.com/CGQ. Lastly, are you having trouble figuring out what to buy your best bud, brother, father, or husband for Christmas this year? Well, this holiday season, why not give the gift of Dollar Shave Club? They have a wide variety of gift sets available, which takes all the guesswork out of your holiday shopping. Whether for yourself or someone else, go right now to dollarshaveclub.com/CGQ. There's no commitment and you can cancel at any time. That's dollarshaveclub.com/CGQ. Whoever you are, however you get ready, welcome to the club.
All right, so that was official Sega Dreamcast magazine, issue number 1 from September of 1999, the launch issue. I want to give a quick thanks to a guy I only know as Vector. This guy Vector reached out to me about a year and a half ago on the Atari Age forums and wanted to give me all of these Dreamcast magazines. I wouldn't let him give them to me for free, so he took some money from me, but I don't think it was even enough money to cover shipping. So he sent me the entire run, minus issue 0 of the official Dreamcast magazine. So if you're watching this, Vector, thank you very much for that. This was a really cool issue for me to read. As I mentioned quickly earlier, I got my Dreamcast in early 2001. So, you know, I didn't get to experience the launch. Unfortunately, I was a PlayStation fanboy, and so I was kind of anti-Dreamcast, which was really stupid because I missed out on a lot of cool games. And I got my Dreamcast in, I think, April of 2001, but then that fall I got a new gaming computer. So I was really only like hardcore into the Dreamcast for about 6 months. So it's cool for me to get to read something like this and kind of see what was going on with the Dreamcast around the time that it launched. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. That's going to do it for this installment of Let's Read here on Classic Gaming Quarterly. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.